This is Join Us in France, episode 235. Bonjour, I'm Annie Sargent, and welcome to the podcast, especially if you're new. At Join Us in France, we talk about all things French, especially travel. I'm French born and raised, spent 18 years in the US, and then came home to France 15 years ago with a strong desire to rediscover my own country. And what better way to do that than to do it with all of you on this podcast? On today's episode, my good friend Elise tells us all about the Gers. That's a gorgeous area just a little northwest of Toulouse where we both live. Elise is a professional tour guide and you can hire her to do this trip with her if you wish, but she's also a very generous person, and so she tells us all about these wonderful places you can go by yourself also. This is an episode where we are unashamedly trying to inspire you to get out of Paris and go explore the rest of France. There are so many quaint, wonderful places that you've probably never heard of or never seen on Instagram, but they are so beautiful and they will fill your soul. And I know that many of you are learning French, and some of you lament that when you go to Paris, everybody speaks English to you. Well, this is not a problem you'd have in the Gers or anywhere else in rural France. Show notes and photos for this episode are on joinusinfrance.com/235. And on that page, I will also list other great trips you can take from Toulouse. If you want to come to Toulouse for a week or something, you can be a very busy bee doing all these day trips and visiting Toulouse. Join Us in France is brought to you by Patreon supporters, and as soon as I'm done recording this intro, I'll record a Patreon reward about Robespierre and the terror during the French Revolution. I've been reading a lot about the French Revolution because this is an area that we didn't learn very much about when I went to school in France, or at least I don't remember any of it. And so I think I finally have a grasp, after reading so many books, on why the terror happened, and I'll share this with you in this installment of the French History Brief. Bonjour Elise.
Bonjour Annie.
How are you today?
I am fine.
On this beautiful sunny day.
It's a sunny day, and it's not. I like this time of year here in the southwest of France.
Yeah, because it's usually not very warm yet. Not, I mean, we've had a little bit of rain, but nothing crazy. Nothing crazy.
No, and it's the time of the year when everything is flowering.
Yes, it's all in bloom.
Love it.
Yes.
I love it. This is lilacs and the beginning of roses and all the fruit trees. We have a lot of cherry trees and apple trees in the area.
In bloom, yeah.
And they all are in bloom, and I love it.
Yeah, we're early April. We're recording this early April. It'll probably be released late April, possibly May, but...
It never used to be springtime, as that was my favorite. That's a very horrible sentence. Anyway, springtime never used to be my favorite season, and since I've lived here, it is. So I like it.
Yeah, I like it too.
And traveling around, and we'll be talking about going into the more or less countryside, out of different directions out of Toulouse. You get to see more of it. You see all the things. The wheat starts to grow, the flowers start to bloom. It's a nice time of year.
Yeah, so today we're going to talk about taking a scenic drive, visiting scenic villages around the Gers.
The Gers.
So that's Gers. S.
Yeah.
And it's off the beaten track. Must admit, it's off the beaten track.
It's off the beaten track for people who don't know the southwest of France very well.
Yeah.
For people who are used to things that are more spectacular. The Gers, which is a river, which actually flows into the Garonne, is the name of the department.
Yeah.
I guess everybody who listens knows now that France is made up of departments, and it's the department that is west of Toulouse,
right?
Basically, and so
it's northwest.
It's also west. I mean, it's really due west, and then it goes a bit north, and it ends. It touches a bunch of things. It touches the area of Aquitaine, the huge region of Aquitaine. Yeah. And on the far western edge of this department, you get into the area called Les Landes, which is the big pine forest going towards the Atlantic.
Yeah.
To the south, it's the departments that enter into the Pyrenees. And to the north, we have the Lot-et-Garonne and Tarn-et-Garonne, which are places we've talked about because we've talked about villages in those areas before. Yeah,
right.
But the Gers is a place that a lot of French people go to for the summertime. And also a lot of Brits.
Yes.
A lot of Brits. And probably one of the reasons why is, well, historically, of course, it was part of the area that was fought over when the French and the English were killing each other about, who controls what territory. But also it's largely a region of beautiful rolling hills.
Right.
It's very lovely. It's not highly dramatic. It's got none of the cliffs or the things that you get in the gorge, and the things like that. It's very beautiful agricultural land. It's very nice.
Yes, and lots of rolling hills.
Lots of rolling hills.
If you get a nice view, if you're on top of a hill, you get a nice view. It's really
a nice
pleasant.
view. You can get and also this goes back to my very first trip to France when I was much more adventurous and I was much younger and I traveled around and people took me to the Gers and I discovered that its formation of its hills, and I'm not talking from a geological point of view because I don't know nothing in that case, but from an artistic point of view, the hills are like horizontal ridges that kind of flow one after the other going south into the Pyrenees. And I did a lot of drawing the first time I was in the Gers. And that stayed with me because I liked the formations. I'm not used to that kind of hill. I don't know why it is that way.
Yeah.
But it's very much the two main industries of the department are agriculture and tourism.
Yeah.
It had, believe it or not, I was looking up some stats yesterday. In 2018, it had 1,700,000 tourists.
Really?
That's huge.
That sounds like a lot to me because I've never seen it super busy.
Well, I think a lot of people go to the Gers and rent places for a week. Like there are lots of gîtes, the houses you can rent. Yes. Lots of now, I'm sure, Airbnb.
There's chateaus that you can rent.
Lots of chateaus, lots of small chateaus and very beautiful little villages. And because the area goes back very far historically, has zillions of tiny little villages that are very beautiful. And a bunch of them that have these pigeon towers that you and I have talked about and we both love. And some of these villages are these famous bastides with a little marketplace in the center. But they're all over the place, basically. So it's a very nice place to go. Actually, you can actually go and stay up for many days. But if you are based, for instance, in Toulouse, you can go and have a lovely day trip in part of it because it's not that small, so you would not be able to cover every place in one day.
Oh, no. If you wanted to see all the scenic villages in the Gers, it would take a month.
It would take a month.
Because there are many of them.
There are many of them. And some of them are famous, and they're famous for one thing or another, either because they have famous abbeys there or because they have... Oh, that's the other thing. The Gers is also gastronomic.
Of course. Duck, duck, quack,
duck,
quack, quack,
duck,
quack.
duck, duck, goose, 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 and everything that goes with it. And Armagnac, which is produced there.
Which I don't like, but
which
okay.
I actually like. I mean, that's, it turns out I was looking at the etymology, if I remember correctly, has to do with, it goes back to ancient Gascon, which is the language that was actually there like 1,500 years ago. And it basically translates as fire water, So,
I
mean, Armagnac is kind of like cognac and brandy. It's the same process, and it's very famous as a product that comes out of the region.
But when you go, you will notice that all the restaurants will serve duck specialties and foie gras.
Yes.
And lovely. I mean, the gastronomy is lovely so long as you eat meat.
As long as you eat meat.
If you don't eat meat, it's
a little hard. Honestly, yes, it's true. Unless you at least eat omelets or stuff like that. You know?
Yeah.
But it's famous for everything that you can do with a duck or a goose. It's famous for the Armagnac and for a very lovely wine called Madiran.
Oh, yeah, that's
which
right.
is a very nice red. Yeah. It's a very, very nice red wine.
Kind of a bold, to have with dishes that will have some character to them, beef dishes.
There's also a white wine that you would like. I don't know if you've ever had Pacharanc.
I might have, but I don't remember it.
C'est doux. It's a slightly, it's a little bit
c'est
like...
C'est doux ou moelleux?
I'm not sure what the difference is.
Big difference.
Jurançon is further into the Pyrenees.
And that's doux.
That's doux.
Yeah.
I think it's the same kind of category of wine, but I'm not 100% sure. Pacharanc.
Spell.
Pacherenc.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's a place, and it has and something I love, which is actually called something else in other places. What they call there the croustade.
Oh, la croustade. Oh, yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah.
And it's made with flaky pastry and apples and a teeny little bit of Armagnac.
Right.
So
it's like a phyllo dough.
It's like a phyllo dough.
Yeah. The top looks like a phyllo. So it's like an apple tart, but made with phyllo dough,
and then with a teeny little bit of the apples. If it's really made the way it's supposed to be, marinated a little bit in the Armagnac first, and I love it.
Oh, I have apples that are going kind of a little older in the tooth. I should probably do that.
Yeah, you got to go do that.
Yeah. Huh.
So I thought it would be fun to talk about the Gers.
Yeah.
Now, one of the other things that the Gers is famous for, if you know about it, it's something that people do know about and have obviously heard of, and that is the Musketeers.
Of course, the Three Musketeers.
The Three Musketeers,
yes.
Who in fact were four. I love it because there was D'Artagnan.
D'Artagnan, yes.
And then there were other Musketeers, but in fact...
That's the only one you can name?
Yeah.
Porthos.
Aramis. And Porthos or Morthos. There was another one that rhymes with that.
I'm going to have to look it up.
All right.
So, Porthos, Aramis, D'Artagnan.
She's going to look it up.
It's been a long time.
She's going to look it up.
Yeah.
Which is a way of saying, let's start with the city that they all are associated with and come from, which is the city of condom.
Yes.
And yes, out there, I did say condom. I did say condom because that's what the city's name is, which comes from an old Gascon word, and it has nothing to do with what condom means in English.
No,
except that in.
I got it.
In the recent
D'Artagnan, Aramis, Athos, Porthos.
Porthos. I know there were two Oses, right?
Yes, Athos, Porthos.
Right.
Athos, we never hear of him.
No,
he probably didn't do anything.
No, it's just everyone knows about our D'Artagnan.
He probably stood there and looked pretty.
Well, they all look pretty anyway. They were all kind of cute, with their hats and their swords and their mustaches and their fancy boots, like Puss in Boots, and their,
yes.
They were the private king's guard.
Yes.
And it was an honor as a military person to be chosen. They were excellent swordsmen. That was the main quality, fearless, and they were dedicated. They actually really existed, and they were dedicated to protecting the king. And it actually did begin with the soldiers that surrounded and protected Henry IV, but it was his son, Louis XIII. So we're talking not that long ago in terms of the history of France. We're talking about the very beginning of the 1600s.
Right.
When
Henry IV came into power, like 1515 or something?
No, much later, 1580.
Oh.
And he was killed in 1610.
Okay.
And his son, Louis XIII, took over, and he was the one that officially created and named, I don't know what they were called before then, but this is the stories of the Musketeers basically are about the time of Louis XIII.
Right, and they're from the Southwest because
and they're from the Southwest.
Henry IV was from the Southwest.
Was from the Southwest. Yeah. And they were their first military, what's the word now? I'm losing words. Garrison was in the city. It's a small city of Condom, which is why the huge statue of them, which you're going to show, is right there on the square
plaza,
right in front of the cathedral, and it's a big cathedral called Saint Pierre, which because in the Middle Ages, Condom was a much more important city than it is actually now. Now it's the second most important city in the department. It's about 22,000 people, mostly living off of tourism, I would guess, and Armagnac. Because there are the Chai, there are the cavists, there are the people who produce Armagnac in the area, and a lot of the places that people go to buy their Armagnac are the not even necessarily wholesale, but I don't know how you translate caviste into English anymore. A wine cellar.
Wine cellar. A wine cellar, yeah.
And they're really associated with the city of Condom, which, as an aside, does have a museum of condoms because in the 1970s, I think, some clever people realized that Americans, I don't know about the English, but Americans associated that word with a certain thing, and that they might as well make a museum of it in this city, which in fact has nothing to do with it whatsoever.
No, yeah.
So yes, if you go there, you will actually, I have never visited it, but... Apparently,
I can't believe it. This is the one museum you won't go see.
The one museum I won't go see.
She goes into every freaking museum everywhere.
I don't go to military museums very much. I'm not interested in seeing the evolution of swords or things like that.
Or apparently other appendages.
Or other appendages, exactly. Right, exactly. It's an appendage, like the swords for the Musketeers,
Yeah.
But Condom is actually a very lovely small. It's a town. I mean, I guess I'm being snobbish, but say it's a tiny city or a town.
Yeah.
But it's a very nice place to do a stop. It is a nice place if you want to have a lunch.
Yeah.
It's got lots of places, to eat. Talking about, you can tell what my weaknesses are. We didn't eat lunch there because we actually late morning, but we made a lot of stops. And of course, when you don't eat a basic meal in the middle of the day, what happens is you wind up making stops, and each time you have a tea or coffee and a pastry, which winds up sort of defeating the purpose of not eating lunch. But we did do that and had one of these pieces of croustade and had that with a tea right there. But the cathedral has... some very interesting, beautiful stained glass windows inside. It's a late Gothic cathedral that was built on top of an ancient one that was built originally in the 11th century. And there's this wonderful big statue in bronze of the Four Musketeers right outside. So it's a nice stop. It's hilly, as most everything is in the Gers. But the reason I would begin there is if you were leaving, for instance, from Toulouse and decided to go the northern route, which is because Condom is the northern edge of the department of the Gers. So you would basically take the big highway, get off and start there and work your way down further south and around and circle back to Toulouse eventually.
Yes, it's a loop. It's a loop, yeah. And I'll put a map in the show notes of all the places we'll mention.
Yeah.
But it's very funny because when you sent me the list of the villages and scenic places you wanted to mention, they didn't include any of the ones I've seen. So that's the thing with the Gers, is there are so many places you might stop.
Exactly.
Because a lot of scenic little places.
Lots and lots. It's really rich. And what makes it interesting is that unlike some of the other departments, even places we've talked about, it isn't necessarily just like old fortified castle type things, although there are some of those too. Yeah. It's quite varied. And there are zillions of these villages, tiny or not so tiny, and lots of other places. I'll talk about a couple of abbeys that are magnificent to visit, and they're famous as well.
So people ask me if I can recommend, places that nobody's ever heard of and whatever. Well, we're going to mention a bunch of them today.
Yeah, exactly.
Because in the Gers, that's what you get, is scenic, yet not that many visitors.
Right. And really beautiful. And now the summertime is warm. It's nice and warm there. In fact, it can be hot. The crops that they grow there are largely corn and sunflower. And so
which makes it even more scenic.
Which makes it much more scenic. It's really very beautiful. So Condom is basically on the northern edge, and it's kind of the main first stop, if you will. Right next to it, 6 kilometers away, is one of the places that is one of my favorite places that I discovered years ago when I was preparing for my exam to be a guide. And it's a tiny, tiny little fortified village. Really, now tiny, when I say tiny, I could put it on this table. Not quite. I've had a good weekend. I could put it on this table. It's called La Resingle. And La Resingle.
Spell, please.
Larressingle.
Okay.
And it is 6 kilometers from Condom, west of it, actually. It is a tiny, tiny little fortified village. There are actually some houses, of course, people live outside the fortifications, that has inside it the rest of a chateau and a very beautiful church. And it is one of the most charming little places I have seen in France. And when you go there, there's a small museum outside of medieval military equipment and the things that people used to both build and take down by destruction, the walls of fortified castles. But it belonged to Condom in the Middle Ages. It was built for military purposes, but it has a church inside it. It also now has like 2 or 3 cafes that in the good summer season have, places you can have either a little light something to eat or a crepe or an ice cream. And it's really pocket-sized, and it's absolutely gorgeous. And it's got these beautiful fortifications all the way around it.
Wow.
So it's a lovely little stop.
I don't think I have seen that one.
Yeah. It's the western... we didn't go further west because there's more really on the western edge of Gers. In fact, in the western part of Gers, which might be something to talk about another time, you actually have some interesting Roman sites from way back in the Roman times. But we didn't do that part today.
Okay.
This is something we did. So you have Condom. You have this tiny little place called La Resingle, which is really worth the detour.
Yeah.
It's really super charming,
Yeah.
In fact... a number of years ago, with another American from here, I went back there to see if it was possible to do an organized visit there, and was very happy to go back because I hadn't been back in a number of years. It was as charming as I remembered it. It was simply that to get a group to go there, as opposed to just 3-4 people or 5 people in a single car, we would have had to have a bus. And it's a good hour and a half away from Toulouse. So it was kind of one of those, like, let's think about this numbers, But one of the things about both of them is that they are on the road to Saint-Jacques-de-Compostelle. So Condom is also considered to be a pilgrimage stop. And one of the reasons that there are lots of abbeys and interesting monastery structures in the Gers is because there are several routes that head towards Saint-Jacques-de-Compostelle that converge in southern Gers as they go towards the Pyrenees and over into Spain. So there are quite a few of these. It makes it picturesque. It's not so much that it gives you a sense of the heaviness of the religion as that it adds to the historical quality of these places.
Sure.
So from Condom and this tiny little village called La Resingle, we, that is my husband and I, by pure accident, so I can't even explain exactly how we found it, but right nearby is a tiny little village called Moirax, which I had never heard of before, I'd never seen before.
Yeah, I've never heard of it.
And well, I don't know if you want us to talk about why we got there, but I was just telling you. But anyway, we took this side road, this tiny departmental road, and wound up there. And it has one of the most beautiful Romanesque churches I've seen in a long time. Very simple, not very big, nothing cathedral size, in this tiny little village. One of the things about the villages in the Gers is that a lot of the houses are well restored. Mm-hmm. And so you have a lot of half-timbered houses. You have all of the beautiful medieval architecture and a lot of beautiful stone houses, because Le Gers is an area where people have built a lot with stone, with beautiful limestone. So it was this charming, tiny little village that had the remnants of a monastery cloister and this very beautiful church, which was open to visit. Very lovely inside. And walked around. And something I haven't seen, we commented on it. I don't know if we've ever talked about the fact that every village in France has a monument to the dead from World War I.
Yes, I've mentioned that several times. Yeah.
So it's something that you kind of get used to seeing when you travel around France, even in the tiniest little village. In the case of this little village, I've never seen this before. They had a big plaque and they had a photo of every one of the 30-odd men from this village that had died in World War I.
Oh, wow. So they had photos for all of them.
They had photos for all of them, and they had a little bit of information about them. It was very touching.
Yeah.
A very, very sweet kind of thing, because it didn't simply have the date.
Typically it's just the date, the name,
date,
and the date of birth, date of, death.
But it was it was interesting, because between that and finding this lovely little church, really very beautiful inside, very, very simple in its kind of Romanesque architecture.
Is the monument inside of the church or outside?
No, it's outside, right?
Outside.
It's like there's this little, I guess we could call it a square, this, nice open space with this very beautiful tree in the esplanade area right in front of the church. And that's right off to the side is this mini little garden with this memorial to the soldiers from World War I. And kind of, the youngest was 19, the oldest was 34. I mean, it was interesting to stand there and kind of read about them. And there was this tiny little cafe that was very charming. And I spoke to the woman after we got our little coffees there, and she serves as both the post office, the grocery store, and the cafe of the village. It was lovely. It was one of those things. I think one of the things I love best about traveling around like that is you have things you've decided you're going to go to see, and then by accident you just fall onto something else, You know
what this makes me think of? People are always looking for this sort of place in Provence.
Yeah.
But they can't find it in Provence because Provence has gotten so popular. It is full of people.
Yeah.
You can't find it in Provence anymore, but you still can find it in the Gers.
Yes, and the Southwest still has lots of places like that.
Yeah, Southwest still has a lot of places that are just not very. I mean, nobody's ever written I'm sure when I put up this blog post, I might be one of the few people who's ever written about Moirax.
Yeah. Probably. It's not even in the Guide Bleu. The Guide Bleu is the Bible for guides and detailed information about areas, and it usually has a main city and then it'll have the other villages around it that are really interesting and stuff like that. This will not even be in that, know.
Right.
But it's the adventure of taking a little side road,
Did you just get lost?
You
have
just
to tell
lost.
me, did you get lost while you went there?
No, it was because of the gilets jaunes. Because we took, we took. My husband doesn't get lost. My husband explores. There's a difference. There's a conceptual difference between the two. That's guys, you don't get lost. You explore. This is what happens.
So when they got off the main freeway, there's a big old roundabout there that will take you in different directions in the Gers, and I know it well because I used to go in that direction all the time. And they had some gilets jaunes semi-blocking the roundabout.
Yeah, and
on a Saturday.
It was like, okay, we'll go this way, and it was like, oh, look what we just found. It's like.
Very nice.
There were days when it would make me cranky, things like that, but it wasn't. It worked out fine. And another thing that's actually very, very, very close to Condom, on the other side, still we're on the northern edge, is a very, very famous. It's a village, but it's famous for a collégial, which is a kind of monastery. Mm-hmm. I don't think I'm even capable of explaining what the difference is, and that is La Romieux. And it's a very famous one.
Romieux.
No
No
X.
X. Okay.
No X. And it's famous because it is a major stop on the pilgrimage road. Mm-hmm. It's famous for the abbey and the cloister. Very beautiful, absolutely gorgeous to visit. And it's so the little town is actually built up, or was built up in the Middle Ages around it.
I wonder when I go if I'm going to remember going as a kid, because that's exactly the kind of place my mother would always take us weekends. But
it could have been that one or the other one we saw the same day, which is the Abbaye de Flaran, which is one of my favorite places to visit. But the Gers has a lot of these. That's the other thing. And part of that, I think, is because it was on the road to Saint-Jacques-de-Compostelle. Mm-hmm. So other parts of France, every village has a church. Some places the churches are gorgeous to visit. Some places it's the village itself that is gorgeous. But Le Gers, for some reason, has a lot of these monastic structures with cloisters, and quite a few of them. Well, I'm sure that a fair amount of it has been rebuilt or restored, but they are the original structures anyway. So
right.
And they are one of the reasons that there are lots of tourists that go to Gers, because some of them, in the case of the two that I want to mention today, they have turned them into cultural centers. So they have music concerts, and they have art exhibits or photography exhibits, and that brings people in. And it helps the local area, of course, in terms of the commerce, because once you have that, of course, you have people who can live off of all of the subsidiary activities, the crepe places, the restaurants, the cafes,
the restaurants,
the places people sleep in, things like that.
That's called a hotel, by the way.
Oh, it's called a hotel. Yeah. Well, we have chambre d'hôte. There's a lot of chambre d'hôte in Gers, which means
because nowhere is big enough.
Basically a B&B.
Right. Nowhere is big enough to have a big hotel. Like
Right.
you're not going to find a big Ibis
No.
in the Gers. I mean,
Maybe in
Auch,
Auch,
probably,
but
otherwise, if
little
you want
hotels.
either small hotels, small village hotel, or a B&B kind of place.
Right.
Airbnb probably as well. There's probably places
now
you
I'm
could find.
sure there's a lot.
Yeah.
And we twice did stay at a chambre d'hôte, which means a room. It's basically bread and breakfast. Basically,
bed and breakfast.
You stay sometimes inside the house, sometimes you have a separate entrance, but it's very common in that area to do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So we already have Condom and La Rassingle and La Romieux. And this tiny little place called Moirex, if ever you can find it. And then if you take the main road going south from Condom, you come across a couple of the things that were part of my agenda for the day that I absolutely wanted to see. And one of them is this magnificent abbey called the Abbaye de Flaran, Flaran, which is really, really, really famous. And it is a Cistercian abbey.
Oh, those are nice.
Which means that inside the church, there is no decoration.
Right.
At all.
It's white walls, usually.
It was pure stone. And of course, there's a whole history attached to this particular one because it existed starting in the 1100s and then got damaged by the war between the English and the French. And then it got damaged again by marauders. And then it got damaged again by the war of religion. And et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it was just saved each time and rebuilt each time. And it is absolutely magnificent. And one of the things about Cistercian churches and abbeys, the monks were dedicated to working hard and to prayer and a lot of silence, except that they sang. And the churches in Cistercian abbeys have perfect acoustics. So starting in, if I remember correctly now, the end of the 19th century, they turned this particular abbey, because of course after the French Revolution there were no more monks, and they turned it into a place for concerts. And now, because it belongs to the region, and it is given money by the Minister of Culture, it is famous for its concerts and for its art exhibits. And when we were there last week, there was a very wonderful art exhibit and wasn't any music. I think the music doesn't start actually until May. I think that's when they begin having their concerts. But they have a whole program all summer long, and people come to listen to the music and visit. And the cloister is beautiful, and the church is beautiful, and it's one of my favorite places. It's the land, because the Cistercians had land that they farmed. They managed to keep the land around it, which is still farmed by local people. I don't know how they worked that out.
Right.
So you get the sense of what it was like when it was really far away from everything, and it's very, very beautiful. And the architecture is pretty much late Romanesque and then into early Gothic, but mostly it's just the quietness of the place and the architecture, and the cloister is perfectly intact. And you can visit the whole thing, and that was one of the things I wanted to visit.
And of course, this is the kind of place that will charge just €2, €3 to get in.
I think
or
it
something.
was
maybe 5,
4 or 5.
Yeah,
right, exactly.
Yeah. These are inexpensive type of little places, and sometimes when you go around villages like that, you feel. Like if you're going to do 3 or 4 in a day and you have to get your wallet out to visit something 3 or 4 times in the day, I think it's still worth it because they're never very expensive. And it's really worth paying the $4 or $5 or whatever it is to go in because you get a lot more out of the visit.
I just looking at my notes, it's the most visited site in the Gers.
Really? Then I must have seen it at some point.
That's probably the one you went to with your mom, I would bet. It's, there's another one that's not in the Gers, that's Cistercian, that is actually in the, now I'm not sure if it's Haute-Garonne or Pyrénées Atlantique, which is the Abbey of Escaladieu. And it's also Cistercian. And they were associated.
Escaladieu?
Escaladieu, yeah.
Can you spell that one?
Escaladieu, Escalad, après Dieu.
Dieu, D-I-E-U.
Yeah. And they're associated. The monks from Escaladieu are the ones who actually were the original monks to build and inhabit the abbey in Flaran.
Oh, okay.
So it was associated.
But there's
with
no
them.
more monks in Flaran.
No,
right.
No. It's really run by the Ministry of Culture now. Although, honestly, I don't know if there are any services ever there. I have no idea. The church is again totally unadorned, but totally intact. So I don't know if maybe certain times of the year.
Are there benches in there?
No, I don't remember. No, I don't think so.
So it's probably used as a cultural space, like for concerts, and maybe they bring in chairs and benches when they have a concert
chairs,
or something. Yeah.
It's right next to a bastide called Valence-sur-Baïse. It's the little river called the Baïse. And
so that's B-A-I-S-E?
With a 2 dots over the I.
Yeah,
over the I. Which is very beautiful. And it was built because of the abbey. The Bastide came later. The abbey was in the 1100s. The Bastide came in the early 1300s. But it's a very lovely little town. So if you're in that area and you want to just do a quick stop, for a coffee or whatever, it's a lovely little Bastide, like one of the many in the area. And then the last of the major stops that I wanted to make, because we did do a couple of other quickie little stops after that, but the other one was continuing down this main road. That's basically this main road going south from Condom. You get to La Vardance.
Yeah.
And I love this place. Again, we'll see photos. It's a village that's part of the group of most beautiful villages in France.
Okay. So it's big enough.
It's big enough.
Because I think to be one of the most beautiful villages, you have to have like 1,500 inhabitants around or something like that. There's some rules.
I think, because we actually had stopped and had a crepe and a tea or coffee in this lovely place that I thought I would plug because the lady was so nice. That's just outside of the enormous chateau. I think she said they had about 1,000 people. So that may be the cutoff, because Court Social does not have 1,000 people year round. I don't believe so. I don't think so.
Even though it's much more famous.
And Saint-Sacré-Popie, which was the very first one of all
that
of these.
probably doesn't even have 1,000.
It doesn't have 1,000 people year round. So I'm not sure what the numbers are.
Yeah, they do have a cutoff. Some of these villages, that's why you can't get too hung up on the les plus beaux villages de France or the most beautiful villages in France. Don't get too hung up on that designation, because sometimes places are gorgeous, but they just don't qualify. There's
a whole, what the French would call a cahier de charge. Huh?
Right.
You have a list of things you have to have.
Right. You have to meet certain criteria, and you have to also pay for to belong to this group.
Right.
And some villages, they're just not interested.
Right.
Like,
and
no.
but one of the things that is true is if it's a village that has this label, it is clean. Mm-hmm. There are wonderful flowers and flower boxes everywhere, because that's part of the condition.
Yeah.
And they have fixed up all of their old, beautiful houses. I mean, that's part of the whole thing.
It might also be very empty.
It could be very empty.
All the ones I've seen, I don't know what it is with me. It's bad luck. I go to one of these things. It's not that I don't like them. I think they're pretty, but they're usually just devoid of life.
Well, it depends. Now, so let me just say a couple of words about La Vardance, and then we can actually talk about this, because now this is going further south along this road. You just turn off. It's a couple of kilometers off of the main north-south road. It's 20 kilometers north of Auch. The chateau is this enormous Renaissance chateau. It's massive. It's up on top of this rocky hill. So when you drive up, it's very impressive, even from a distance, because it's not only that the castle itself is huge and it's Renaissance style, which of course means rectangular windows, although it was built on top of something more ancient, but it's on top of this huge cliff that's this kind of rock. So it's really, really important and dominating. And it was built as a military bastion, basically. And it was built for the Dukes of Armagnac.
Okay.
It was their military fortified castle. And they were the ones who owned it and took care of it from the 1100s on. And it was rebuilt in the Renaissance. So that is why what you see is actually Renaissance style. Although right now, since we were just there exactly a week ago, they are doing some work on part of the outside walls. They're fixing up one side because it's enormous and it requires work all the time. But it was because of the fact that it existed that the village grew up around it. And the village is what is called a castral village, which means in the Middle Ages, you start with the castle and then you have the village that gets built up around it. You know?
I've never heard that term.
Castral.
Castoral?
Castral. Castral.
Huh.
Yeah. It means that it's not a bastide where the village came first.
Is that a French word or an English word?
It's a French word.
Okay, castral.
Yeah, castle. Yeah. It means basically that first they started out with a fortified castle. It's kind of like Baynac. It's the same kind of thing.
Okay.
And then because there was a lord there with his entourage, then a little bit of a village built up basically around it. So the village of La Vardance is a village that has, I think, just about 1,000 people all year. But, of course, it has a fair number of cafes and restaurants that are not open all year. Mm-hmm. And since we got there at 6, the castle closes at 6. Ha, ha, ha. Normal. So we couldn't get in. One of the reasons I know about this castle and that I've been to it several times is because, like the Abbey of Florent, it's a place that has exhibits of art.
Okay.
And it has exhibits of various kinds of, not just art, but it has basically a museum space inside that they're in the process of fixing up. And I saw this absolutely wonderful show of sculpture of Camille Claudel there a number of years ago. Once I saw a ceramic show there. It's a part of the castle that's been devoted to this. At the same time, the castle is absolutely magnificent to visit. It's just stupendous.
You go for both.
I go for both.
Yeah.
And then, so, it's 6 o'clock. It's tea time, right? So there's a restaurant that's kind of fancy that's right next to it, closed. It's not yet the season. And so we walked a little bit down one of the beautiful little cobblestone streets, and you walk 50 meters, and there was this lovely cafe restaurant with lots of wisteria, which is in bloom right now, on the outdoor terrace. And we got crepe and tea and coffee there, and had a bit of a chat with the woman who was the owner, who was very nice, who does... she stays open all year on the weekends. But she was telling us that, like a lot of the villages in the Gers, they really only make a lot of money in the high season.
Right. They do. Yeah.
And a lot of people that live there work in Auch because it's only 20 kilometers away, because otherwise there is not that much around there as a way of making a living if you're in the village itself and you're not a farmer, I mean, it's just a...
Right. In places like that, you either farm or you run a cafe, or you might be a teacher if there's a big enough village.
Right.
If there's some kids, but
I think she said there was an elementary school
right
there,
so this might be the kind of schools where I went when I was a kid, although it wasn't in the Gers, but other places in France where they had rabbit hutches in the place where kids, what do you call that, la cour de récréation,
the playground
for the kids, sorry. So we had rabbit hutches, we had chickens.
In the school?
Yeah. So you'd be listening to the teacher, and it was a one-room class for all elementary age.
All elementary.
All of them. I was only there for a month or so, and that's because my father was working in the area. And so we were staying in the area, and we were supposed to come back to Toulouse for the beginning of school.
Right.
But his work required that he stay longer, and my mom decided, well, we'll just put the kids in school here for a month, and it'll be fine.
Cool.
It's one of the nicest experiences in my life.
Funny, the memory you have of it.
I grew up
in the city.
I grew up, center city, Toulouse. And so for me, seeing rabbit hutches, when I walked in there and I saw chickens and rabbit hutches, I was like, whoa, where have we landed? What sort of a school is this? But there's a lot of them all over France,
A lot of the villages have them in 1 or 2 rooms for all the different grades.
Yeah.
So anyway, this was this very lovely little place, and we stayed there for about a good half an hour talking to her. She had no clients left at the end of the day, and I was asking her about, as a guide, I was asking her how that works, and what time of the year is really good. And she said, of course, it's June, July, and August when they get the most people coming through, and otherwise it's people who live there, who work somewhere else, or some retired people, and a lot of, in all of these villages, lots and lots of people who are foreigners who have come in and made these villages come back to life again. That's another thing. Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
So that was a lovely little place.
And honestly, I really wish that we would have some of these people who are struggling, like Syrians and people like that. I really wish we would just give them an old house to fix up in those villages. I don't know if the locals would appreciate that, but these are young families,
right.
Make it easy for them to take over some old house and fix it up.
That's right.
Anyway, that's just an aside.
That's true. I mean, lots of these villages are places that have only come back to life because foreigners have moved in.
Yeah.
Sometimes retired families or couples, but sometimes families with kids, and they have brought the village back to life, because that's why they have only 1 or 2 room schoolhouses.
Right, they need more of that.
They need more of that,
Yeah.
So La Vardance was a place that I was on my list for the day. And
La Vardance.
And I just love this place. I think I like the name too. I don't know.
It's a nice name.
It's a nice name.
Yeah,
I don't know why. I just really like it. And we walked around afterwards. Lots of medieval houses, lots of flowers everywhere. It was really very lovely. So from there, we were on our way back to Toulouse, and to do that, you go through Auch to pick up the big highway. And Auch is the biggest city in the Gers. It's approximately 70 kilometers actually from Toulouse. You can take a train to go to Auch if you just want to go to Auch from Toulouse. It's a city that's famous for its cathedral.
Right.
It's a fairly big city. I think it's on I'm not sure it has the same amount of population as Albi, but probably about 40. I would guess about 40,000 or something like that.
It's about the same size as Albi.
I think so.
I would think.
I think so. It's got a couple of technological schools, but it doesn't have a big university center or anything like that. But it's interesting. Its history is very, very interesting. It's a city that's built on two levels. If you arrive, as we did, coming from the north, you arrive at the top part of the city. If you take a train to go to Auch from Toulouse, you arrive at the bottom.
Right.
And the city is built in two separate parts. And there's this famous, very, very, very big staircase that you can take.
Never ending.
Really, really, really never ending.
But it's massive.
It's massive.
It's so wide. It's kind of picture. I'm sure I have a photo of that.
It's quite amazing. And if you don't have the heart, the lungs, or the legs for doing that, you have a bus that's a kind of shuttle bus that will take you actually from the train station all the way up to the top. But we came the other way, so we arrived in the top part, which is the oldest part. And it's the part that was the original Auch, which, believe it or not, goes back to the Romans. And, I had to add this little thing. This is the kind of stuff I love. It was originally called Augusta Oscorum. Oscorum.
Can you spell that?
Well, I can if you really want me to.
I want you to.
It's Augusta, like in Augusta, Georgia. Augusta.
Yeah. Okay.
And then the second word, Aus, A-U-S, which is where we get the Auch from.
Yeah.
C-O-R-U-M. Oscorum. So it's Latin. And it's why, the Romans were always very clever. Remember, the Romans invaded everything, right? But the local tribe of people, the local people that were there before the Romans were a tribe of what are called the Aquitans. That was actually the name of the kind of people they were. They were Celtic peoples. Yeah. And their tribe was the Osques. A-U-S-Q-U-E-S. So the Osques gave the name of the city to Oscorum, which became Auch. There we are. So we have Auch. It is a very, very important religious center.
Yeah, the cathedral is impressive.
The cathedral is very impressive.
I have spent a good amount of time taking photos inside of the cathedral.
Yeah.
And it's gorgeous. I'll put photos on the website.
The Auch became a major stop on the pilgrimage road. And for other reasons that I'm not really quite sure of, became a very, very important religious center. Of course, we have all of these monasteries and collegial in these villages in the area anyway. But because of its importance, the cathedral, which is a flamboyant Gothic one, was built in the 1400s on the ruins of the oldest, the Romanesque one. And it is an enormous, enormous cathedral.
It's
and it is
large.
very, very famous. It's famous for two things. It's famous for its windows, which are Renaissance stained glass windows. And they are really very famous. And they've just been cleaned up. I mean, they're still in the process of doing a little bit of work on them, but they mostly have been just cleaned up. And it's famous for the woodwork inside, which is called the stalls. And they were done... and it has made it, the church is a World UNESCO Heritage structure. Mm-hmm. The man who did the windows was Arnaud de Mol. And it's very rare to have the name of the person who actually designed the windows.
Renaissance.
And they're Renaissance,
you're right,
exactly.
then you would know.
Right.
Yeah.
And the wooden stalls, there are 113 of them.
Right.
And they are absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah,
they're
pretty.
just a trip,
Yeah.
And if people don't know about, stalls were what were added into these churches so that the monks could sit and stand and pray, and they would sit and they would get up and they would sit down again and all of that. And they're made of this very, very hard wood and carved with all these fantastic things on them, on the handles and on the backs.
And the organ in the cathedral sounds pretty good too, which is unusual because some of them don't. So it was funny because one day I was there with my sister-in-law, who's a pianist. Mm-hmm. And so she was very interested in the organ. And we found this man, we asked questions. And he turned out he was the organist. And so I can't remember if he played it for us or if he just... But I heard it. For some reason, I heard it. And it sounds really good. Some places, the organs, they need a little refreshing. They're kind of out of tune.
But this one, then, I think they still... I think they have a festival. I think they actually do. They have a festival.
Yeah.
So, Auch is... Well, it's not gorgeous as a city, but it's worth a stop to see the cathedral.
Right. So that's what I was going to ask you. If people wanted to visit the Gers, would you recommend that they stay in Auch and then take day trips around there?
No.
Right. Or if they wanted to stay several days, I wouldn't stay in Auch myself.
No, I would stay in one of the... There are a couple of other places that are really important that I'm not going to talk about because we really didn't go there last week. But one of them is Lectoure, which is where the pastel industry for the beautiful blue dye is centered. Mm-hmm. And the other is a small town kind of in the same category as Condom called Florence. And so I would say one of those three.
So stay either in Condom or Florence
or
Lectoure. Okay, yeah.
And they're towns. So because you have villages that, and I think there isn't a village in the Gers that doesn't have some little rooms for rent somewhere, but they don't all have little hotels or that kind of an infrastructure.
If you want to rent a room,
restaurants and things like that.
If you just want to rent a B&B, then you'll find a bunch of them.
There's another one actually, Cologne, which is which is very beautiful and closer to Toulouse. But if you want to go into the heart of Gers, you might as well go to either Florence, Lectoure, or all the way north to Condom, and then Condom, and then you can circulate out from there, because from there you're really pretty much in the center of the department, and so you can explore every direction you want. Whereas Auch, for me, it has a few old streets and everything, but really the thing that's important there is the cathedral.
It's the cathedral and the stairs. That's what it's famous for, is really the cathedrals and the stairs.
There's another place that's famous that I'm not going to talk about because it's actually in the extreme southwest of the department, but that is very famous because of its jazz festival, and that is Marciac.
Marciac,
which is really a bastide.
Right.
It's a bastide that has now become world famous because of its incredibly important festival in the month of August. That is a major jazz festival with the biggest names in the world and the biggest singers in the world going there. And it's very, 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 very popular.
Yeah.
It's gotten a little bit out of hand. There's official stuff, there's off, and then there's off, and some of it's expensive.
It's very large. It's very large. And to find accommodations around Marciac for the festival is very hard.
It's very hard.
Most people I know, they have like a camper or something, and they just drive their
well, it's far. I mean, I know some people that go every year for a day or two, but they reserve like a bed and breakfast months and months in advance, because otherwise you have to be in one of these towns in the center of Gers, like Florence or Condom, and then drive the distance to go.
Right, and at the end
these are
of
narrow country roads. I mean, these are.
This
is not, and it's not like roads like in Ireland. I mean, they're very good condition and all of that, and you don't have just hedges blinding you on both sides. But we're not talking about highways. We're talking about
small roads. And
you
really, to visit the Gers, you need a car.
And you need a car.
You can't. I mean, you can't. We didn't mention it at the beginning of the show, but this is the type of place where
you need
can't
a car.
see.
You can get to Auch by train if you're a serious bike person.
Right,
yes,
but then you're going to get your exercise because it's up and down and up and down and up and down and up and down.
There are probably a couple of bus routes, that will take you to a couple of the major spots.
Between Auch and Florence, and between Auch and Condom or something, but not to the village. They're not going to stop at every bastide along the way.
Absolutely not. And there are tiny little places that you really do discover by driving around. And then there's Cologne, which is another beautiful bastide that's a little bit closer in to Toulouse, a little bit north and east of Auch. There are lots of fun. And then just very briefly, if you do a circuit like what we did from Auch, there's a main road that takes you back to Toulouse. It's a big road. It's it's well done. It's brand new.
It's a 4-lane highway.
It's a 4-lane highway most of the way. But you have an option when you get to a small town that's relatively close to Toulouse called Gimont. Which is a little bastide, a tiny little village that's a bastide. You can either drive through it to see the square. It's one of these, there are several villages like that are built in like a horizontal, they're not square, there's like all long. So there are 2-3 streets that are just very long.
Like the Far West.
Like the Far West. But the thing about Gimone is that it is the home of the Gras market.
Le marché du Gras.
The marché du Gras.
Of course.
And that means Gras, Gras, is everything connected to the ducks, the geese, and the foie gras.
Right.
And every morning from 9:30 to 10, notice, from 9:30 to 10, for 1/2 hour, every morning, every Wednesday morning, from 9:30 to 10 all year long, there is a market. And then there is one on Sunday mornings as well.
Why is it just a half an hour?
Well, because it's... I went there once with a university group. They had no idea what they were doing there. I did. It was really kind of fun because basically it's an auction.
Okay.
Because what it is that you have the people who own restaurants, you have some people who are just individuals who want to buy their fresh foie gras so that they can do their own canning and everything. But mostly what happens is that all the producers bring in their duck and their geese, not alive anymore, and their foie gras, which is fresh now. It hasn't been prepared.
Right,
it hasn't been cooked.
Le foie,
and people who are serious, either retailers or restaurateurs or serious chefs, come there and they go through the aisles. It was fascinating to watch them. And they look at, some of them know who they want to go to because that's the farmer that they work with. And some of them, they test them, they look at them, they look at the color. Sometimes you test them with your finger and stuff like that. And so everything is fresh and has to be sold right away. Okay. So it only lasts for that amount of time. And it's only Sunday morning that it lasts.
You said Wednesday.
Wednesday morning all year. And then Sunday morning, it lasts a little longer. Okay. So 2 times a week. Wednesday morning for a very short time.
And most people I know, my sister made her own foie gras for a long time. And she would buy the livers.
At the market here?
Well, I don't know where she got them. But she would buy them usually in September. Mm-hmm. This is a September, early October thing because then you let it kind of...
you cook them and leave them in the their fat, right? I mean, you preserve
but you can them.
You can them,
and
right.
then it's best not to eat them right away.
Right.
You need to wait a few months. And
right.
since it's a Christmas food,
right.
she would typically make it in September or late September, early October, and then put them in the basement and let them.
I think that what they have is, there are a bunch of companies like in the Dordogne that do their own canning and everything. So
right.
My guess is that since it's all year, it's because they do produce this, on a kind of regular basis for the canning and all
for
of
a
that.
Restaurant, you need it year round.
And you need it year round. So, I mean, this would be... this is the curiosity of this little town called Gimone. Otherwise,
is it scenic? I'm sure I've been to it, but I don't remember anything.
It's got one street that's scenic because it's as I say, it's this kind of village that's a kind of long, linear, horizontal kind of thing. So it's got this one long street or 2 streets that are parallel that have old medieval houses, and this small central marketplace that's covered because it's a bastide. And then the place now where they do the market is this modern thing down below, that basically, because there's a modern part of the village down below. It's up on top of a hill, Mm-hmm. But it's just one of those things. It's famous because of that, And then from there, without stopping in the zillions of other places that you could stop in, you get on the road and you can head your way right back to Toulouse. And we did all of this in one day. Right.
It would be like if you stop... I think the driving time for the loop that you mentioned from my house, so I'm in northern.
You're in northern.
Yeah, Toulouse. It was 4 hours and 21 minutes. I think
altogether.
It was telling me. Yeah, altogether.
Right.
Just the driving time.
Right.
So from your house, it might be a tiny bit longer.
A tiny bit longer because, I'm in the northern side too. But the thing is, we did stop a lot. So it was nice because we didn't feel... at the end, I get a little bit nuts in the car when I've been sitting too long. But we made many, many stops. We stopped a few times to visit the cathedral, the abbey. We had coffee or tea.
It's just a pleasant day.
So if you go early enough and you have lots of stops. And if you're thinking about, well, where would I have lunch? Well, Condom, any of the bigger villages or small towns have always a couple of little restaurants, you know, and so it's very nice to do.
And if you want to look them up ahead of time, I never do that, but I wish I could remember now the name. If I remember it, I'll put it on the website. But you do find in those bigger villages, you do find restaurants that are kind of destination restaurants. So your lunch will cost you around 40 euros, but it's it's cuisine soignée, so it's always nicer than a pizza or a sandwich, which you will also find in those types of places.
Yeah.
But if you want to find a little bit better lunch, you totally can.
Yes, you can.
There's a lot of that type of restaurants in
There's
the
also, I mean, we wouldn't, unless it was a special occasion, spend that kind of money on a lunch, but there are the famous salad Gascon, which of course has foie gras and other pieces of duck and stuff in it, which is a classic thing that you can get as a very nice full meal. You know, they have very nice salad, these big meal salads, and
with meat in them.
With meat in them, you have the goat cheese salad. I mean, you have all these
gastronomy
kinds of things.
in Gers is
just really good.
Yeah, it's very good.
I mean,
you eat well.
Pastries and you can even do all kinds of things like that. I think that there's no lack of places to eat, and sometimes, if you're lucky, there are two places I've eaten in Cologne, which is a little closer into Toulouse. But sometimes, you know, if you come across a place that has a very nice daily special, you can get a very nice meal for 15, 16, 17 euros that for lunch, you know, that kind of thing.
Yes, and it would be fine. But if you want a nicer lunch experience, go for around 35. Because
that's true.
They do have a lot of these restaurants.
Yes, they do.
That serve a fantastic lunch around 35, 40 sometimes. That's one of the reasons why I like to go to the Gers.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that because I wouldn't want to spend that much time eating. You know,
right. That's why I go.
Yeah. So, but you're right. And of course, if you do a weekend, that's a great thing to plan because there are certain Hotel Manoir that are famous for their meals like that. You know.
Yeah.
Condom has a couple of really nice restaurants, and La Varnat's this nice little cafe restaurant.
And you can go by the price pretty much. If it's around 30 and up, you'll eat well.
Yeah.
In the Gers, you'll eat well.
Yeah, you will eat well.
Yeah.
And you will drink well too.
Right. I'm not talking including wine here. I'm talking just the meal.
Right. Yeah. No, but it's just so this is
it's a lovely part of France.
It's a lovely part of France.
And we might do some other episodes on different areas of the Gers because today we talked about the Auch and a few scenic villages.
But it was basically the north
others.
And the northeast of the Gers, you know.
But as a day trip from Toulouse, it's totally doable. It will take most of the day.
Yes.
You know, if you make stops, you'll probably leave your hotel or whatever at 9 in the morning and
come back at 8 at night, you know, or something like that, 7:30, 8 at night. Yeah.
Right. It'll be a full day, but it'll be a pleasant day.
But a very pleasant day. And if you do it in nice weather, it's so wonderful.
It's wonderful. Thank you so much, Elise.
You are quite welcome, Annie.
Yes, I might have to go myself because you sent me some photos, but they're very small. Your phone takes small photos.
My phone takes small photos. And just to mention, you know, if there are 2 or 3 people out there and they are interested in having a guided visit of this part of Gers, I am available for that kind of a thing.
Yes.
You know.
And your website?
My website is Toulouse Guided Walks.
That's right. And you can do this in Toulouse. You can do this any of the other places around Toulouse you can do. And you're very good at it.
Le Bruniquel, Le Spiessel, which we've talked about and all of that. But there are so many places that you can visit as day trips around Toulouse.
Yeah, and they're wonderful.
Thank
you, Elise.
You are quite welcome.
Merci, everybody. And I'll be back next week, and maybe Elise will too, because I know you have a lot of good ideas for episodes.
I have ideas.
Yeah, good
ideas.
It's
springtime.
Yeah, it's great. Au revoir.
Au revoir.
Thank you, Teresa Willett, Emily Magistrelli, and Kevin Black for pledging to support the show on Patreon this week. And Kevin, And Kevin, your wife Elaine signed you up for Patreon for your birthday today on June 2nd because she knows you love the show. So joyeux anniversaire to you. I hope it's wonderful. And my thanks to all the other patrons who support the show month after month. Thank you all for giving back. You can support Join Us in France on Patreon for as little as $2 per month. Visit patreon.com/join us, Patreon. Join us, no spaces or dashes, to see the different reward tiers. And I want to mention that if you need individualized help planning your trip, if you want to practice your French conversation skills, or if you need help with a document in French, there's a tier for one-on-one time with me as well on Patreon. And my thanks also to Laura Lou for sending in a one-time donation by using the green button on any page of joinusinfrance.com that says tip your guide. She wrote, Annie, thank you for all the information you share in your podcasts, Facebook page, and website. You are a gem. Thank you. When I listen to your podcast, I feel like if I were listening to a good friend giving me travel advice. I love how real are your commentaries. Keep up the good work. And yes, I am happy to do that, and I like to keep it real. This is a labor of love, but it's also good to be able to pay a few bills with my work as well. For my personal update this week, I haven't left the house much because my Labradoodle is recovering from her sterilization surgery. I've had to keep a close eye on this girl. She was really freaked out by the cone. So we went to a donut around her neck or a tight shirt around her body. But those freaked her out as well. She really wasn't herself for days. We're almost back to normal. The bandage is gone. The donut is gone. So I just now have to watch to make sure she leaves the stitches alone. We're almost out of that dreadful sterilization phase. It's so much easier for boy dogs. Oh well. But, since I've been home a lot, I've taken this time to record new episodes, and thank you to all of you who have volunteered to come on the show to share your experiences about France. I'm recording several more coming up. It's always fun to talk to all of you, and those episodes will be released in the next few weeks. It's warming up a lot in Toulouse. When the sun finally gets a little bite to it, we've had sunny days. We get sunny days in the middle of the winter too, but it's still chilly. The sun is like it's not doing its job. Well, today for the first time I felt, the sun is doing its job. So let's all prepare to enjoy summer. And remember, if you come to Paris in the summer, you might want to consider a place that has air conditioning because it can get very, very hot. Not so far, but you never know. If you want to recommend the podcast to someone who is not a podcast listener, and I really hope you do, send them to joinusinfrance.com because they'll be able to read a summary of the episode as well as listen if they want to. It's really easy. Podcast listening has become tremendously popular, but half of the English-speaking population has still never listened to a podcast, so it's all new to them. So they don't know what to do with a podcast, but they do know how to go to a website. So send them to joinusinfrance.com. Next week on the podcast, I'll talk about the cider route in Normandy. It's a really exciting way to explore Normandy, so stay tuned for that next Sunday. Send questions or feedback to Annie@joinusinfrance.com. Have a great week of trip planning, and I will talk to you next week. Au revoir. The Join Us in France Travel Podcast is written and produced by Annie Sargent and copyright 2019 by Addicted to France. It is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license.